Hey up everybody, welcome back to the Outdo Cycling YouTube channel where today I am going to be previewing Paris Tours. This is the last preview of the year for me because of course there are going to be no more races, so thank you very much one and all who have been here through all the videos. If you are still here, thank you so much for watching all of the content that I've put out this year. It has been a great 2022, so let's try and cap it off with a really strong performance in Paris Tours, a notoriously quite difficult race to predict. I know that I've certainly struggled in the past few years to exactly nail down how, like, the winner, but usually kind of the race is very attritional, and sometimes there's like a sprint behind, kind of like an escape group is usually how it somewhat happens. So let's try and use that as like our basis here. I don't think that Nizzolo is going to be a good pick. He didn't do particularly great the other day, and I'm not sure about his form at the moment. Philipsen seems like a really strong one because he's sprinting really well, but he's also very versatile where he can get away into kind of breakaway moves and stuff. So Philipsen's probably a very strong one to be putting onto your team at 24. Stuyven did very well in this race last year. I think he finished on the podium, or he was definitely in that front group, but he hasn't looked quite the same this year. Of course, he came third in World Champs last year. He hasn't quite looked particularly great this year. There's been some like flashes of form, but I'm not convinced about putting him on my team for this edition. Bennett, I don't think is going to be a good one. I'm not sure the pure sprinters are the way to go, so therefore Ackerman's probably not a good one either. Kuznefroy, I think could do well, but or could just do like terribly. I'm not quite sure which way to read with him. He has done pretty well recently. Tlevai Valacini, of course, came top 5 there. He did pretty good. Of course, he won Quebec, so he clearly has these kind of good periods, but I'm not sure if this is going to be the race because, I'm not sure how he goes over this kind of gravel terrain. But I think that he is a kind of rider who should be doing well in this race, and if a move does get up the road, I would be quite surprised if Kuznefroy wasn't in there. Demar, of course, was the winner from last year, and he's in some really good form recently, winning, well, not like winning loads of races, but definitely being competitive in a lot of these kind of French one-day races. So I would be expecting him to do well in this race as the defending champion. I think he will be spearheading the Groupama team. So Demar, a good one for 20 to get onto your team. Gaviria, probably not that great. Laporte, I think, is another good one. Of course, they do also have Olav Koy, so it could go either way. But Laporte is just looking really good recently. He's in a really just kind of... He's just got some really good results, and I think that he's the kind of rider who should be doing really well here. Of course, there's going to be no Wout van Aert, so Laporte should be the team leader, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what Laporte can do without him and Wout van Aert. I'm looking forward to seeing him as the leader for the team because I think that he definitely has the credentials and the capabilities of being a leader of a one-day race team. Naesen can do well in this kind of terrain, but hasn't looked too good in the last few races, so I'm going to probably say no. Trentin, on the other hand, has looked quite good. World Champs was good. Of course, he was dropped the other day at Gran Piemonte, but there aren't climbs like that in this race. It's all very short and sharp and punchy, and I think that he's the best rider that UAE probably have in this race. So Trentin is another good one. The 18-point riders I'm not a big fan of, but if you had to push me to choose one, I'd probably say Sepp Van Mark could pull out a good result like he did at Maryland Classic, or maybe Viviani could be one if it came back to a sprint. Bettiol with DNF to Lombardia today, so we'll have to see how he goes at Paris Tours. The kind of rider who should be doing well in this race, in my opinion. He's of course won Flanders in the past, so this kind of off-roady sort of style stuff shouldn't phase him too much. Gilbert, probably not, although I do like Phil Gilles. Kung, I think, could provide the attacking option for Groupama, or he could be used more as a super domestique to try and bring things back together to help Demar with a sprint, for example. So Kung could have his own opportunities, but I think more than likely he'll go for Demar. And then Coquard, I think, is a good one because he's been sprinting very well in the last few races, so probably quite likely to finish inside the top 10. I think he finished somewhere like 6th last year, so quite a good one for 14 points to try and get onto your team. Hofstetter, I for some reason have quite a I'm not too sure about Hofstetter for this race. Usually he's the kind of rider who, because he did so well at Trobro-Leon, he won there earlier this year, this race should be right up his street, but something just doesn't quite sit right with me about it. I can't quite explain. His results recently just don't look quite up to scratch of Hofstetter, and I think that they could actually go for Mathis Louvel instead, who's a 6-point rider. So Hofstetter, I think, is a bit risky for me. I'm not overly certain about picking him. Gianni Vermeersch could be a good attacking option for Alpecin because they've got Philipsen, who could be a sprinter kind of in the group behind. 12-point riders, I think that Tiller's a good one. He did like a 16th place at Worlds, and then he's done another race recently where he did a pretty good performance as well. And he's the kind of fast rider who's also very capable of getting over these climbs. So I think that Tiller for 12 is a good one. You've got Arnaud Delis, probably the best 10-pointer that you could go with, but there are some other ones. Of course, Delis will likely be sprinting, but his climbing at Britannia Classic earlier this year really surprised me. So I think he should be getting over these climbs just fine. Coy, the sprinting option for Jumbo-Visma. Of course, they'll have Laporte, who'll be attacking up the road more than likely, I would expect. So Coy could sit in behind and certainly do a good sprint. So another good option if you think it's going to come back to a sprint, a nice cheap one. Mazzato, I think back to Trobro-Lyon again. He finished second in that race. He's very good at these attritional, very punchy one-day races, especially kind of ones in France. So I think that Mazzato is going to be a good one for 10. He's looked strong recently as well, so certainly a rider who I think could really benefit your teams. And then 8-point riders, really not too many that I like the look of, so I'm not going to recommend any. 6-point riders, possibly somebody like Lewis Askey has been looking quite good in trying to help Demar, but again, I do think he'll be helping Demar in this race, so probably not a great one for like his own personal ambitions. Kim Hajduk is a pretty fast sprinter for Ineos, so if Viviani's dropped, perhaps he could be the man which they go with. Of course, he got a couple of top 10s in the Crow race quite recently, so perhaps another one there that you could go with. Mathis Louvel, as I mentioned earlier, I think that he's looking really strong. He, of course, has done so many good performances this year, the young Frenchman. I think he's only 23, so a really strong rider, and I think that if you need a 6-point rider, I would probably be choosing Louvel more than likely. I think I favour him as the best 6-point rider, but there are some other ones which I will point out. Jason Tesson, of course, going to Total Direct Energies, is a good sprinter for St. Michael Albert, so possibly another one that you could go with there. I'll shout out Scott Thwaites just because he's local to like Yorkshire and stuff, because you know I am from there. Dries van Gestel is quite good at attritional races, so another one who you could go with there. However, it's worth noting that the weather tomorrow is quite fine and sunny, so that doesn't suit Van Gestel too much, who is a bit more of a rider who prefers like the wet conditions by the looks of things. And then you've got Axel Zongler as well, but he could be working for the Consoni and Brian Cockard. And then there are some 4-point riders. Axel Laurence is another one for B&B Hotels. Famously, you know, he came second at Britannia Classic this year, and he did really well at the Croatia race as well, so he's obviously looking in superb form at the moment, so a great 4-pointer there, possibly the best one. There's also Hugo Page, another strong sprinter for Intermarché. I think that he's the fastest rider which they have. And then you also have Ben Turner for the Ineos Grenadiers, who I think will be, if he can find some of that Classics form from earlier this year, he would be really dangerous in this race. But other than that, you know, I think he'll be more a domestique for the likes of like Viviani possibly. But if Viviani's dropped, I think that Turner would be a great one. Tim van Dijk as well, just as a kind of another one. I think that he's a really strong young rider. He could have his own opportunities to come inside the top 10 in this race. So just another shout out there. In terms of what I'm thinking of going with at the moment, I've got a team which is this, which contains some attacking options in the likes of Kuznefroy, but also Trentin and Laporte. And then I've got some sprinters in the likes of Mazzato, Delis and Demar. If you wanted to swap this round a little bit, you could put Philipsen on and then take off one of the 10-point riders, whichever one you don't like, and then put on a 6-point rider. I would be going with Louvel, but of course put in whichever 6-point sprinter you so desire. So those are the two kind of scenarios that I am between. I think it's probably a good idea to split your team between some sprinters but also some attacking options, because both seem to do quite well in this race, and I'm not quite sure which way it's going to go, so that's my strongest advice for you. And all that is left to say is thanks for watching, stay safe out there, and yeah, I guess I'll see you in 2023. Salut!